Hello and welcome to the Plone Newsroom, episode 5. You're listening to Philip Bauer from sunny and beautiful Munich, though cold, and my co-host.
Fred van Dijk, and it's just as lousy, I just said to Philip, as last week's Blue Monday. So yeah, it's our second Blue Monday, I think, here in the Netherlands. But still, it's sunny here with our local lighting on. Philip.
Good. So the Plone Newsroom is a podcast about what's new in the world of Plone, which is a open source content management system written in Python. So if you're listening to this as an audio only podcast, we're doing some small demos during this episode, which you will miss. We'll try to explain what's happening, but there's a YouTube version where you can actually see these short screencasts that we're doing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Happy New Year! Officially, You're not allowed to say it, but this is we made it to the new year, Philip. It's our first podcast in 2022. Welcome, listeners. So we're a bit late with the podcast. Blame it on the holidays and some work that came in between, and relaxing a bit more for me. We have been picking up client works ourselves as well. I mean, we're kind of, what do we label ourselves? Developers, integrators. We both run an integrator company. So we had to do some catching up. But here we are with a new TPN podcast. So we thought 2022, let's start with the news, development news.
Yeah, Plone 6 has not been released yet, but stuff is going on. So Plone 6 comes in two flavors, if you don't know that. There's the normal flavor, which is Volto, a new React-based front end, and the classic flavor, which has a server-side rendered HTML front end. And there were weekly sprints on, I guess, both, but I attended some of the classic sprints where we worked on a very important PLIP, which is a Plone Improvement Proposal, and it's called ES6. So what's ES6? ES6 is the old hat already. That's JavaScript in a new version, and so the point is that the old Plone version was still used require.js on all these jQuery and stuff that you don't really want in modern JavaScript world, even if you don't develop in React. And so there's this PLIP that Hannes has written mostly and has championed, but a lot of people are working on that to update the JavaScript story of Plone Classic to ES ECMAScript 6. Update all the mockups, which are like UI interactivity tools, and the whole PLIP is down to 2 failing tests, which is really great.
That's crazy cool. I made a joke, I think this weekend about going into single digits, and people picked that up more, like we were like 14, and now we're already, I thought we were at 4, but we're at 2 now. So that's really cool. So this is actually the second batch of work to keep classic UI relevant. The first batch was the whole front-end CSS story, which was a first major PLIP that was, I think, finished and merged just before summer, which was a complete upstep to Bootstrap 5 from Bootstrap 3 that we were using. And now the second batch, which is hopefully getting merged very soon, is now updating the JavaScript in there. And yeah, as you said, it removes require.js, which has been a long help in the Plone 5 series to make it possible for a CMS to have add-on modules on the server, but then still in the front end have each of those add-ons deliver some extra JavaScript. But require.js was already, I think require.js was overtaken by the JavaScript community itself when in 1 or 2 or 3 years they started doing all kinds of bundling and this interactive bundling together of JavaScript with Webpack and with other bundling tools. So that's and we were still depending on require.js, but it really had to go. So that's a lot of cool work that's now happening in this second ES6 branch PLIP, which will hopefully be merged.
Module federation is being worked on, and a lot of stuff.
And for everybody who says, what's that? Too much information. The TLDR is you will get Tiny MCE 5.x. Which is, I think, for end users and for editors already a big improvement, because Tiny MCE 5 has been built also from the ground up with this new ES JavaScript module system. So that will be also part of Plone 6.
Yeah, that's and we since it's not yet merged, we're not going to preview that. But I guess during the next episode, we'll give you a in-depth view at Plone 6 Classic, the current state of it, once the ES6 branch is merged, because it looks different than Plone 5 and it feels different, and the UI is a bit different. So stuff changes there. So that's and in a good way.
Yeah.
Don't worry about that.
So on the Volto,
there is another topic.
So on the Volto part, Volto is also, of course, being developed, and I'm not sure if we mentioned Volto 14 last time. Volto 14 has been released, and it's Volto 14.2 by now. The work after that, what I've seen is mainly on the Plone Volto Integration package. That is the kind of back-end add-on that sets up everything right for the Volto front-end to find all its slots and its block layout, storage, and all the other things that are necessary for Volto. And it isn't that much if you look at what is being done. But we need to have this extra package in Plone Core. That allows you to, when you now create a new Plone site in Plone 6, the default create Plone button will be overwritten by Plone Volto and set up everything right for Volto. And if you still want to add a classic UI environment, you'll have to look at the advanced button. So that's the main work. And if people think like, oh, Philip and Fred, you know so much about Volto and classic UI. Actually, I didn't do that much Volto myself for the last month, and I still consider myself an end user and a tinkerer. So for this kind of information, I'm just going to communityplone.org and see what people have been discussing in the Volto early adopters meeting.
Yeah, we're grateful for all the work that's been done, and we will certainly, once the new milestone has been reached, do a demo at one of the next episodes. And you will see some of Volto later today when we demo the current state of Plone.org. But we have another, the main feature today is page composition tools. So, how did we get to that? So we got an email by Alessandro telling us there's a new tool around the block, like another new add-on we need to discuss.
Yeah, he kind of asked us, like, can you test it for us? and the fun thing was, I think you mentioned to me, look, we got an email, and I mentioned to you, yesterday I was chatting with some people on Discord, and this guy, Sebastian Verbois, mentioned he was doing this new add-on, and it was the same one, collective content sections.
Yeah, but we thought let's not discuss one add-on because it's one of many page composition tools in Plone. So what is page composition? Let's get back to the drawing board. So in the earlier days when the Earth was still young, we had HTML and we created our layouts with tables, and if we were tinkerers, we were able to position stuff everywhere using a table layout. And then there came floats, and now there's Flexbox and stuff like that. But basically, these are all tools to position items in different places in your browser. Say you want to have a text block, and you want to have another text block next to it. And that's a major issue because HTML is not out of the box. It's not meant to do something like that. It's not built to do that. So a lot of tools were implemented in all kinds of systems, including Plone, to allow creating layouts like desktop publishing systems. So I think InDesign in Plone or in other websites. So that's a tough order.
Yeah, and you have to remember, Philip, Plone is now 20 years old, 21 years. So if you go back in history, 18 years ago, people would be completely confused and would run away screaming if they saw a landing or a homepage that people now consider normal. And non-distracting and pleasing and nice on the eye to find your stuff. But when we started with websites, I think one of the main usability guidelines was don't put more than 3 things on a web page because people will get confused and lose it. So Plone I think until Plone 4 was like, okay, you've got this main content area. In the main content area is the one thing you want to show to your users. And then the CMS, and all CMSs and also Plone, then arrange some nice frame or border around it that shows you some navigation, a footer and a logo, and a top navigation. And that's it. And then I think only in Plone 2 or 3 we got the Portlet stuff that was on the left and the right side. But we had for a long time in that current time of development, that was the whole model we had. We had Plone that had always the focus on the main content area. And then on the left, right, and top above, that was something the CMS ruled.
So that was like obviously solution number one. Just put everything that needs to be in a special position in a portlet to the left or to right or to the bottom or to the top. And there are a couple of tools that did this. So, for example, in 2008 there came a tool called Collective Portlet Page around. Then there was ContentWellPortlets, products.ContentWellPortlets, also created in 2008, and a newer edition of the same basic idea is Collective Panels, which has been supported until 2018. The others were dropped off a bit earlier. 2015, 2016 were the oldest releases of ContentWell and Portlet Page, and these basically allowed you to put content out around the content area, but you still couldn't modify the content area. But with some of these tools, panels and ContentWellPortlets, not sure about Portlet Page, you could just ignore the content area and just put everything in portlets. So you have all kinds of portlets in various, especially for collective panels, you could have infinite numbers of portlets down the list. So that would be your main content. You could just ignore the content, which would be weird.
If you disable the main content and you get an infinite number of portlet rows you could add, which is what I think collective panels was one of the last incarnations of the portlet thing. I mentioned, it's if everything, if the only thing you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And for Plone in that time, it was if all you have is portlets, then you shall use portlets as the user editable blocks or tiles that you have. And it started very small with only one row, a few portlets on top or below. And I have to remind of Plone 5 too, actually kind of imported part of that idea by enabling footer portlets, which we didn't really have. That was a long, that took a long time because we had those extra add-ons that kind of allowed you to put extra portlet slots.
We saw viewlets in portlets in the footer. So there's like a level of indirection that is confusing.
Yes.
Thomas Massman created the whole thing. Thanks for that. It's much nicer than it used to be.
I can't remember. Philip, can you remember Products Collage? Did it also use portlets or did it have its own? That's even a predecessor then, because Products Collage was actually the first composition tool, tool that actually said, okay, forget about the portlets. We have our own kind of portlety thing, and we'll take over the main content area, and that's where the collage was built.
Yeah, that is true. Collages are they use default archetypes content like folders to create rows. And then content in these folders are columns. And they have some custom content types like collage column and collage row, I think. And you can, there is a user interface where you can add them on the fly. It is obviously discontinued since it was archetypes only. The user interface was horrible, but at that time it was some of the more useful ones. But it was not the only tool that we had in the early days. There was also CMF Content Panels, which was the first release was in 2009. And the last release was in 2012, so it didn't live very long. It was quickly replaced by Collage for most use cases. But for example, the University of Gießen has like almost all of their pages are CMF Content Panels. So there's a lot of work for that migration, which is upcoming on my desk.
Yeah, I still remember. I have collective panels somewhere in the site that when we start to upgrade that Plone 4 site somewhere this year, we'll also have to get a replacement for that one. And the thing I always remember from products Collage was that it had these plus minuses to collapse, and then if you had a bit, if an editor was being too active, then you would have these 4 rows of pluses, and you didn't know which one to expand or collapse anymore. So you were first figuring out 2 minutes on which combination of pluses showed you the thing you wanted to edit, and then you were able to edit it. Which shows a bit of the complexities of page builders and how we try to solve it in that days.
That is true. So for Collage, I have a client where we did a huge migration. It just launched on December 30th last year, so 3 weeks ago. And they had lots and lots of collages, and we migrated away from Collage. And once there were like 2 solutions: just drop everything, create it fresh. But I thought that's nifty. So what I did is I rendered the Collage page as it is, get the HTML and cut out the inner part, only the content, and put that into a rich text document, rich text field as HTML, add some CSS styling, and the collages were no longer collages but static HTML content, but they looked exactly as they used to be. So, and then the editors got that content and got a time frame in which they could decide, okay, this is fine because it's only static text anyway, but I abused Collage to have 2 rows of blocks of text next to each other, 2 columns, not rows, or another column below. But a lot of other pages were populated with topics at that time, not collections. Like there's a topic here, and there's a topic there, and there's another topic, and these were allowed to be recreated in Mosaic then. So an editor could get some training, and hey, okay, here's your old version. Here's the static HTML version of that. If that's not good enough, here use Mosaic to recreate what you want to show.
So you actually
that worked fine.
You actually use internal screen scraping to get the data out. So
well, we have object publishing. So if you have an item in Plone and you just call it, you call the call method on it, you get the HTML result, and that's exactly what I did. And I just cut out whatever I don't need it at the bottom and top and the edit bar and stuff.
Yeah.
But there's a third tool which is really old, Products Composite Pack. I've never heard of that, but I read about that. And Tresceiver was working on that. So a real old Zopan.
I think that's soap. I think that wasn't that a soap product that kind of got pulled into the CMF and then Plone.
Yeah, well, it mentions Plone on its side. The only release ever was in 2011. Nothing else.
That can't be soap only. That's that's newer. Or maybe it was because I remember that when soap
they used it internally.
When soap corporations started to disband or change focus, whatever, then suddenly also a lot of packages got released afterwards. So you already dived into. Look, I've been working with Products Collage and moved it to Mosaic. What stood me out in this first generation was like it was all portlets, and portlets have this huge functionality or feature in Plone that they are hierarchical. So you can define a portlet on the root level, and then it will stay with you in that sidebar, going turtles all the way down in subfolders, unless you override it, and then you see another portlet. And using those portlets again for storing and building composite pages is cool, but if you don't need the hierarchy or the inheritance down, then there's a lot of overhead in there, and also a lot of cringy nasty stuff for a developer to keep pushing things into those portlets. So a second generation of, or maybe already the third generation of page composition tools was when tiles and blocks got introduced. And that spurred the development of both collective cover, but I think I got it a bit around first, because first we had the whole deco movement. to get a new interface, and for deco on a programmatic level, tiles and blocks were defined. And then collective cover said, look, that's all nice, but we want something extra. So they used most of the infrastructure for from Plone up tiles, Plone up blocks in the rendering, and then created a different editor and extended the blocks a bit, which became collective cover. So that's the second and the third level, collective cover and mosaic that we had. Yeah. And I think we didn't really mention that before we even page composition tools and people got the smart idea to reuse portlets to build things. The only real solution you then had was like defining an extra template and having the view class of the template collect all the dynamic information there and create a kind of program your front page of the home, program the home page of your site. I think that's how we did different home pages in the early days of Plone, before those Portlet things came up.
Still write custom views for a lot of home pages because they have specific needs. They probably don't need to change, and it's hard to recreate them in Mosaic or some other tool. So, but let's go back to, so what is really in use now is obviously Mosaic, Plone app Mosaic, and collective cover. But there are some other tools that we'll get to later. But let's differentiate between these two. So Mosaic, and we're not going to demo that because we guess everybody knows Mosaic. Mosaic has a behavior. If you enable that behavior on a content type, you can select a layout. It's called layout view.
Mosaic layout. Like that. Mosaic layout is called.
Then you can actually position your blocks, your tiles, not anywhere, but in a grid system, in a Bootstrap 3 base, I think, and it's going to be updated to Bootstrap 5 based grid system, and you can like change the width and not the height. The height is obviously dynamic, and you have all kinds of tiles like dynamic existing content, embedly, and so on. Most importantly, rich text, so we can put all kinds of rich text fields in weird blocks in a weird grid system. So, and it's the schema. So these tiles are schema based, like content types, but they're not content types, and you can define your own tile in a Python schema. And you can write your own tiles, you can write your own templates for these tiles, additional view methods for them, and so on. So that's a very much used add-on, and it's used in Plone 4, 5, and 6. Can you tell something about what's happened like 2 weeks ago? There was a mini sprint that was announced.
Yeah, so we had a mini sprint on bringing a number of add-ons to the ES6 JavaScript level. So we kind of organized a one-day sprint with the people already working on Classic UI. We kind of chatted with each other. Hey, who's using Mosaic as well? What should we do when Plone 6 gets released? Do we have people that need to have Mosaic in Plone 6 as well? And there were a number of people. So we planned a small mini sprint to look at that. But halfway the morning, I think we found out that there was something else breaking in the ES6 branch that needed the Mosaic branch to work. So we kind of detoured and got back to the ES6 branch and starting fixing robot framework tests there. But in the meantime, I think Johannes Ragram fixed or had already part of the Mosaic update stuff to have the Mosaic JavaScript work with ES6. And I think 2 other people now also stepped in to look at the Mosaic stuff. And meanwhile, the other people did some stuff for Mosaic, but also got the big issues down. Philip, one thing I said, collective cover and Mosaic. What I always found a marking difference. I mean, we didn't quickly discussed the whole why of composite page tools. So the whole thing is why composite page tools is because you want to allow editors to change the layout, and that's a big question you first have to answer before you start using any of these tools. Because, like you said, even in Plone 6 or maybe even when we go to Volto, sometimes you don't want editors to change the layout, and most often they're not capable, which is maybe very nasty to say editors are not dumb, but it's not, it's often not required of them. And every page composition tool needs some knowledge of you and some experience to get it working, because the UX of these composite page builders is often very tricky to get right. And that's also, I think, you see in the history when I just complained about Portlets Collage throwing 4 or 5 rows of pluses and you don't know what to click. And that's still with Collective Cover and also Mosaic. Those are, I think, the better reincarnations around 2010, 2015 of how you could create such a tool. But there was one thing that was really, besides that, different between Collective Cover and Mosaic. Collective Cover had from the start separated the layout changes from changing the information in the tiles itself. So there was already a permission there. So you could say, okay, only the webmaster can create a new layout. And then normal editors without webmaster manager permissions can still change all the data in a tile or block, but cannot move the blocks around. So then your layout was still kind of safe there. Mosaic also has that support, I found out later, but it wasn't really fleshed out completely. Mosaic has something you can change the classes in the content layout, and then you can kind of lock Mosaic classes. And Mosaic also did have a kind of templating system where modifying the template was not allowed, but I kind of never got that really useful for myself.
It is sometimes too powerful for its own good. Like all these tools, it's number one is it's really easy to mess up your layout. Your CI is easy to go down. It's like if you allow your editors to have pink text on light blue backgrounds. It is. People are going to use that, and they're going to use that for a horrible effect all the time. So all these tools allow, for example, most importantly, Mosaic and Collective Cover allow to constrain these layouts. The Collective Cover is not a behavior on any content type. It is a content type, and it has two distinctly different views for creating a layout and composing the content in that layout. These are two completely separate things, and they can be protected with permissions, obviously. So it's easy to have a fixed layout where only the editor can only edit the content but not move a tile somewhere, which is also true in Mosaic, but it hasn't been true in very early iterations of that.
And the other main distinction, I think, between Mosaic and Collective Cover is that Collective Cover always insisted on that if you put something in a block tile, cover tile, that was the term.
Yeah.
I'll get back to that later. Then every data in there was always saved on the context of the cover item. As you said, it has its own content type, and it was also stored as an annotation in the ZODB, and you couldn't really further on see the content or the things that were there. Like with Portlets Collage, you could just go into Plone and dive into it and see the items there. But both with Cover and Mosaic, those are stored as annotations. But Cover always said all the data is always in a tile, so the tile is persistent. And Mosaic has had two modes of tiles. There were persistent tiles, and there were I call them ephemeral tiles or standard tiles. And those were not storing their data from the schema they had inside an annotation on the context, away from editors to touch, but they were just pulling the normal fields or other things that were already on the context, or they were for example, the top navigation that is in normal classic Plone a violet, but in Mosaic you have also a navigation tile in Plone standard tiles, and that the navigation is not dependent on the context. It's just generating at all times where you are, so there's no actual data involved. So in Mosaic, if you start up the Mosaic editor and you drop down the list of tiles, there's a nice number of tiles there that are actually just small windows for example, to insert the title from the context, or the description from the context, or the other thing. And that's another level where Mosaic was much more powerful, because you could also use Mosaic not only for your content layout, but kind of drop all of the frame that Plone 4 and 5 had in the classic UI, and where the viewlets were with the top navigation and the other stuff. You could say, okay, ditch all that, use all the space, and then build like a full composite page builder. You are responsible for the whole layout of your page, and you can also insert the tiles there for the top navigation and for other things. And that
I've never used that feature. That was too much. I like viewlets. I don't want to replace them with tiles.
Yes,
reinventing the wheel.
But you see that development there was a lot of evolution and not revolution. And I think it also explains to because I really want to show the whole. The culprit who started this conversation, which is collective content sections. I'll demo it shortly. I just want to talk, Philip, Volto. You first.
No, collective cover, because we said Plone App Mosaic, we use it in Plone 6 pre-alpha deployed websites, so that's fine, and there's active development. Collective cover is far from abandoned. It runs on Plone 6 in Python 3. I did the Python 3 migration. Other people did a lot of work, so I just did tiny things, basically. And I also have support for collective cover in export import. So for the University of Oxford, we're migrating like hundreds of thousands of cover pages from to JSON and re-importing them as cover, and they work great. So it works fine in Plone 6, even though the JavaScript story definitely needs some love. I haven't really looked at the JavaScript code there, but I'm pretty sure it's not ES6 ready. But it works. You can get it to run.
Yeah.
So that's the state. You can use both tools. Both are in need of a release, but that's the state. So let's get back to what about Volto?
Yeah. Look, these two people are now promoting and advertising and cheering on about all the tools that we've had. Then why do we need Volto? And I think Volto, I've explained already the whole trend to some of my clients. Like I explained it 4 or 5 years ago already with, look, we've now so far, we've been painting, we've been using HTML as the background canvas. And on that HTML canvas, we had all the text and the HTML markup. And then some parts we sprinkled small, tiny JavaScript applets, thingies that made it a bit more interactive. But what you see in the last also 5 to 10 years is that the whole switch to more and more interactivity has switched the thing around, where now web apps are like a JavaScript canvas with JavaScript components everywhere. And then sometimes there's a bit of HTML sprinkled in there for the text. And it's a complete turnaround. And also to continue with that, what we just discussed, getting the UX and the user, how users use it, so it's a page composition tool, is very tricky, and I think there we already started to hit the limits of how much interactivity you can create into a web app if it's HTML with some JavaScript blocks sprinkled around there. And if you look now, all web apps are now built using the JavaScript canvas on back and making real web apps, which kind of makes it necessary to have a full JavaScript environment in your browser. And that's the thing that Volto provides, and not the other way around. And the second thing is, we've been discussing, look, you can have small blocks with information there. And what is also happening already for the last 5 to 10 years is that we want to have small mini applets, very rich content in those applets or in those tiles. So you want to have interactive charts, you want to have graphs, bars, you want to have maps, you want to have everything there, and getting all those tiny content filtering, still listings, and getting all that JavaScript working in a composited page where HTML is the background canvas.
It's a nightmare.
It's a nightmare. It's more than a nightmare. So, and that's also the big promise for Plone that Volto will deliver, is that it will be much easier and even safe and not nightmarish to say, hey, there's this D3GS charting library. Let's make a custom Volto block in there. Import the JavaScript library on your JavaScript canvas and get the stuff running. And with Volto, you can do that in half an hour and not run away screaming after 2 days, because after the 10th conflict between different JavaScript things and the JavaScript from the Plone CMS itself, you still don't get it running. So all the effort, all the things we've done for the last 10 to 15 years with composite page builders and classic UI, I mean, we still have classic UI in Plone 6, and if you keep your JavaScript needs down a bit, then it will be doable. But going JavaScript, full JavaScript canvas in the front end with a separate front end to the back end is the only way how we're going to create these nice fully interactive portal tile-based composition things for the years to come. It's the technical necessity is, I think, people overlook that. People think sometimes, oh, Volto is just people who think they know how to build a composite page tool better. No, it's a technical necessity to from now on further into the 2020s.
That is very true. Thanks for that. So we last episode we showed the state of Volto with the blocks tile, where you can have blocks in blocks and stuff like that. So at some point you can get to this situation where you can ruin your layout even in Volto. But since it's from the first idea is to have a vertical list of blocks, makes it really hard to ruin the visual representation of your content. And I hope that the new Plone Org website will benefit from Volto being visually sane and making it harder for you to ruin stuff.
But also user experience wise, or for editors, if you point back,
it's a totally different game than everything
look
else.
At the keynote from Timo from last PloneConf, where he said command what was it, control, and for me it was make image handling in Plone sane again, where you only say for an image left, right, center, full, and small, medium, large. I mean, that's one of the things that this user experience really needs thinking about before you unleash it onto your end users.
Definitely, and the defaults are just beautiful. That's a lot of hard blood went into that, making this not only really approachable and good for editors, but also actually look good. So I'm amazed every time. But let's get back to the wrong
one. Let's share. I'll want to show. Show this one. Share.
Let's get back to Plone 6 Classic.
So this is
we started out with the collective content sections.
Yeah. So here it is. Collective content section. I've shared my screen. This is so. Compliments also to because this is the people from IBIO that have been kind of prototyping collective content sections and extracted it from some needs from their customers and tried to build this for Plone 6. This is the easiest demo I've had. It took me 5 minutes to start this up. There's a repository collective content sections in the collective. Check it out, run, make, install, make, run. It uses Plone 6 already, the Alpha 2, and then you can even import a complete demo section, which I've now done, using, you'll never believe it, collective export import. So there's a 40 megabyte JSON, just import it and you'll have a complete demo. So this is the demo, and the interesting thing here is that you can see this is a demo for World Plone Day, and collective content sections goes back to the whole store your content hierarchically in the Plone folders, or special content types.
It's basically collective cover, not cover.
No, it's
collage.
It's collage. It's collage. But then it's with the 2021-22 user interface. So the user interface is much slicker. So look here, I've got World Plone Day. It kind of if you have to get used to the default one on top. So it shows this in a line, and then for each of those rows, you see you've got very quickly. So I can just, instead of going to the folder contents, I can click contents here. So here are the images for the tile, and you can say, okay, actions, change or delete. You can change the view to something for that view section. So you've got a carousel view or a card view or whatever for those images. So that works nicely. Go back here. And you've got also for this one, actions, edit section, delete section. And new, here you can just add. So here you got all kind of the row types.
So is it a behavior on a folder, or is it its own content type, a container?
Well, I saw so quickly,
types?
it's all their own content types. But the content types is, of course, restricted to, if I go back here, then I have add new. Here's not. Oh, that's a good question. How did they actually enable it on here? Because this is.
Click on edit so we see how
it's just a folder. It's a folder.
Oh, it's a folder. So it seems to be like a behavior maybe on the folder.
Maybe.
Or they replace the folder type.
Maybe it's just done just the way Mosaic works.
Yeah.
View, add new view, display. That's cool. I forgot. It was so easy to install everything. I forgot to look at how you can edit later. But then you still have a page with sections. This is quite cool here. So you got a card section, HTML section, and then a link section. And you can change the section view, what I just did here. But it gets.
Can you move blocks around?
No, not here from what I see.
All right, so it's not like Mosaic.
No, it's not like Mosaic. But then again, this is again for the use case. If you just want to have people having this and having it functionally doing this, then the responsiveness, then the ordering is of course just what's in the item itself. So if I now go back to the third one, page with text sections, because here it gets interesting. These are different text sections, and then you can say, okay, edit. Look, and here it's just a page. But with some extra lead, also extended the lead image scale. But it's snappy. It works. But then it is limited that you can't move blocks and things around because the storage is actually just items in folders and in subfolders.
Yeah, I see.
And of course you could just order. And you use the familiar Plone concepts of reordering. It's just like shifting the things around.
So that reminds me, because there is actually a tool that does almost the same, and I've written that for a client requirement.
What haven't you written?
Yeah.
So I'll stop my screen sharing. Do you have it available?
Yeah, okay. I have it.
I'll stop my sharing.
It's called Collective Modules. So every tool has a fancy name. Let me share my screen here. And it uses exactly the same concepts, like default Plone content, dexterity content, and you have a container and you add them, and the order in the content is how it shows up. We use it extensively for a couple of clients, including this one, Dynajet, and everything you see here. You see the layout that we got from the designer is it is these blocks, like one after the other in a vertical listing. So, and each module can be edited. There are different modules. You can add them here, module, gallery, relation module, all kinds of modules. You can edit them, very similar to what you showed. This is a default content type. They each, the view method is on the content type schema. So there's a difference between these two tools. So here in the schema, I have the templates are in a vocabulary here, so you can still change the template for that. And let's see, here is a relation module, which is like the go-to for almost everything, because it uses something nice. It has like title, automatic summary, and then it does the following. It's a mix between a multi-relation content type. It relates to multiple items, and a collection. And so it aggregates these two and throws away the duplicates. And you can link to all kinds of, in this case, expert know-how items in this folder who have this kind of category. But if you want something specially featured, you add it as a relation, and you find it, you relate to it here, and it adds it at the start, because in a collection it's really hard to define what item you want as at the top of the thing. And the way it works is exactly the same. So there is a behavior on folders, and here's my modules. You can move them around. So there's also not a user interface where you can move stuff to the left and right, top and bottom, but there's like I could also go to folder contents and move it around, but this does basically the same.
But it's a whole new level of information architecture where you, for a client, you already know how they work, and you kind of mimic or build your information architecture in such a way that it also, I think, mimics the whole product assortment and how they split up the things in the site themselves.
Exactly. It works nice for them. So I'm not trying to throw different tools against each other. It works nice. We use it. Some other companies use it that I know. Feel free to try it out. We'll add the link to the show notes. The interesting story behind that is it all comes from a client requirement. In this case, the client said, we need these blocks need to be linked to. They need to be targets of a relation. And that only works with content, and they need to have their own workflow so that we don't have to like check for the permissions in the template, which would be possible, but they need their own workflow. And what happens with these requirements, obviously, guess.
Guess. Well,
can you guess?
No.
How often did we have to link to a individual module?
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah.
0 times.
Yeah.
So the obvious solution was to use Mosaic and create a one column layout, which is easy in Mosaic. You can just create a layout where only one column is possible. You can't put 2 items in one column. And then put tiles one after another, and you have basically the same result. You can just move stuff around easier with your mouse. It's not content, so the workflows and the stuff, but the 2 requirements that the client insisted on just didn't happen. So it was a lot of work, but we could have probably gone the easier way with a Mosaic single column layout.
And you could have gone even easier, because there's a second Mosaic editor which is not mentioned at Mosaic at all, but it's from Red Turtle, and it's called Red Turtle Tiles Management. What you can do with that, it's kind of, you still can use all the tiles that are defined in your system, and you created, for example, for Mosaic, that's a tiles blocks thingy. But then if you have a custom content type in the view template, you can just say, insert a tiles slot here, just like the portlet left or portlet right. But you can say in the normal template. So for example, let's say you would want to add this dynamic list of linear tiles to a news item. You could override the news item, put a small slot in there, and then when an editor sees the page, there's a small button edit, and then they've got a linear only, so not a whole mosaically editor or whatever, but you've got a linear list where they can add those tiles there, and then you don't even have to use Mosaic. I found out about that a year ago. I didn't have a use for it in a client project, but it was a very interesting lightweight alternative to the Mosaic editor, because it's essentially it styles all the way down in that thing, and it doesn't really matter if it's in the Mosaic editor or somewhere else rendered. Yep. So I mean, we're way over budget again for our subject here. Yeah. I was already afraid when we started like Composite page, but yes, indeed, Philip, it's all starts with custom requirements, and we have the same generic experience. If you ask somebody who will start using the site, an editor or a webmaster or whatever, what do you think that you might need? You get the list of 100 items, because they are afraid that they might miss a use case, so they will ask maximum flexibility and configuration. And then when you say them how much it costs, they will they will get scared a lot, because you can't build all possible combinations and all possible configuration types. So you slow it down again. But then still a lot of features in the end will maybe stay unused. And I think that's the biggest, I think, a risk with composite page things, and also something I think that Volto will give us a leap higher. In the first and second generation of these composite page tools, you really had to watch out for combinations, that some combinations did not work, or they were not intended to work. And then 1 year later, a new hire maybe logs into the site, starts mixing all the tiles, blocks, portlets around, and then complains it doesn't work. And then it's like, yeah, it doesn't work because it was never intended to have this combination of 6 portlets next to each other or whatever down. And then you get into, well, not a fight, but that you get, of course, into discussion. Okay, your use case has changed. Let's change the configuration. And then you have to modify all these guys and extend it. And I think that's also something else that the whole JavaScript canvas with JavaScript components, with a JavaScript-defined user interface, is that also Volto is, again, there a bit safer, that it doesn't matter what you pull next to each other. It's isolated much more because of the JavaScript component encapsulation, what you have in React, and that makes it also much safer.
So to take away one very simple answer is, if you're wondering which tool to use, obviously, if you can't use Volto, use Volto. That's like the best solution and the easiest. But if you're stuck on with Classic, where excellent use cases and excellent tools, it is probably the safest to go with the tool that is most used for one simple reason. Because if a lot of people use that tool, there is very likely a migration path away from that and to get the data out, and many edge cases are taken care of. For example, indexing. In my tool, we did the indexing, so it obviously needs to index the text on they're called modules, these content types, on the parent. So there are custom indexes if you have this behavior and able to pull out the data and throw that as a data on the parent and stuff like that. And if you write something like that yourself, you're very likely lost. So that's something to keep in mind if you need to choose something like that.
Especially don't build another composite page tool builder.
Yeah, I did it wrong probably. I should maybe move to the one. I'm not sure. I'll still have to compare them. I like mine because it's super slim and fast, and we use it for crazy use case. Folder contents, for example. In
Philip,
let's not go there.
Not invented here syndrome.
No.
My tool is better than yours.
Let's go away.
Yeah. Okay, so that was it. To say summary, yeah, if you're on Classic UI, I would have said 1.5 years ago, don't even try Mosaic, because people were not using Mosaic, although we're using it as is. But fortunately, we've got some fresh blood or attention into the Mosaic stuff by upgrading it to Plone 6 with ES6. So Mosaic is safe. I would have said the same about Collective Cover, because that was even in a worse state than Mosaic when you look at community and how many people and install base. But then there are some very large installations using Collective Cover, and for those really huge, especially in Southern America. Yes. And there, the numbers for upgrading simply are, okay, either we upgrade Collective Cover to work in Plone 6 there, or we have to move all those composite page things to another composite page system. And then, just looking at the time, fortunately, Cover will also be updated, I think, to Plone 6 eventually.
Yeah.
For those
I have
systems.
Another takeaway. So if you're looking at choosing something like that, if it's for your front page and your landing pages, and you have, say, 20 landing pages on a medium-sized website, choose whatever you want. It doesn't matter, because for your next iteration of the website, you're going to throw these all away and recreate them, because your front page is not going to look the same in Plone 6 as in Plone 8 than in Plone 5. You're going to do away. But if you use it for the bulk of the content, you have to be really careful, because migration is an issue there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that will conclude it. And if you don't, and still a separate template that is completely programmed using a browser view and pulls in the data and is just fixed also works.
Yeah, fine. Or another nice trick, tiny MCE templates. You can add a template to TinyMCE to choose from that gives you 2 columns.
No.
In the Bootstrap system,
Don't.
and you can just type your text in there. It adds some crazy HTML, but the data is still in your.
I've always tried
editor.
in the past to keep people not from trying to do content layout in TinyMCE, but then still,
yeah, it's a terrible idea.
It depends. Is still the safest answer. Sometimes if the requirements are very, very little, you can do it, but there's always requirements creep in there.
Okay, let's draw a line here. We'll look at page composition tools in Volto at some future point, because there are a lot of new blocks, add-ons that are created where you can do more stuff than Volto offers out of the box. So this topic is not dead at all, but for today it is.
And we'll certainly get back to Mosaic when Plone 6 is ready to look at the classic UI implementation. Okay, so that's our main. More.
Yeah, we have a small section on sprints and other updates. The first one being Plone Org. Should I just go with that? So there was in December, I think, there was a Plone Org Sprint, and now in January there was another. Thanks to Riku Pecker, who cat-herded us to actually doing some work. And a lot of work that I wasn't part of was put into creating the front page, making it look nice, using the right blocks in the right way in Volto, arranging data. What I want to show is something which is really, really important for those who think about migrating to Plone 6, and not Plone 6 Classic, but Plone 6 with Volto. Because if you have an existing site and you have rich text fields, these obviously do not show up in a document in Volto because the editor is completely different. But thanks to Enrico Andre, we have a tool to migrate data from HTML, rich text, to Slate, the Slate editor, which is will be the default editor in Plone 6. And during the sprint, we've worked on creating an upgrade for that. I'll share my screen to show that. I can't hear you. You muted yourself.
I muted. Yeah, there's somebody clapping here. So we kind of don't turn on washing machines while record a podcast, but I can't influence my neighbors. So Plone.org, what we want to do is a renewal, move it to Plone 6, of course, but also use Volto and do a lot of cleanup there, and try to stay as close to Plone 6 Volto front end as possible. But still update a lot of course, we have to update a lot of things there. And the Plone.org sprints I think are a really cool thing to get critical mass on what we are working for our clients, what people are working for their own organization to move to Plone 6, and have all those things also in a kind of community project to move the Plone.org website itself through all those phases, where we will need all these tasks completed.
Yeah, so if you're interested in what's going on there's a repository called Plone.org, which has the front end part and the back end part as directories, and everything's going on there. And what I already showed last time, this is like the website imported from Plone 5.1 thing, I think, using export import, and this is like the Plone 5.2 or Plone 6 in this case version of that. And what happens now, if you use that as a backend for Volto, you don't see any text, because this is in this case this is a page, and your rich text is only in this editor, and Volto doesn't. It would know what to do with that, but since you want the Volto Slate editor, you won't see it there unless you do some programming, whatever. But the point is how to get this from A, this is like rich text, to B, and there's now a nice form. It's still called Migrate to Slate, and it's still in Plone.org, but it shows you all content types that have the Plone Volto.blocks behavior enabled, which gives you the Volto or Slate editor, and then you pass in a URL of a tool that is the blocks conversion tool that Enrico wrote, and that is seen active development. You can run it locally on an npm. So here npm start, and it runs. So that was quick.
I'm not sure if so. You said it's by Enrico. Didn't Enrico use parts of an older conversion tool that was created by the people from Red Turtle to migrate from rich text to Draft.js, which is the old rich text implementation? I think he lent some code there.
Could be that he stole some work from someone else.
We all do all the time.
We all do. So whoever put a lot of work in that, thanks so much. There's still work to be done because not everything works out of the box perfectly. Basically, you just click and you can purge rich text fields. This will go in plone.volto probably soon, and then you can you got your content. I already have this here, so I got my Plone site. This is a Volto site. It uses the backend. Just to prove that it actually does, I'll show you the resl dev proxy API path is my local Plone Org instance, which is the Plone 6 site. And there's everything, obviously, all the news items are there. But we didn't show that yet. We only showed that in the old version. Let's see this one here, for example. There is, obviously, I need to call the view method. So there's content from 2002. What should Plone be? Stuff like that.
Wow.
Alan Runyon wrote that, and the dates and everything is still there. But and if I edit, this also works. But and as you see here, you get the right editor. You get the Slate editor. I migrated news items to the Slate editor as well. I enabled the behavior. You saw the news items there. So you can move these blocks, delete blocks, move blocks around, add new blocks in between, in the middle here. And the same goes for, I don't know, let's see, the board of directors. Here, Chrissy, that was last year. And so on. So this tool is really fast and it works, and it's a very important part of the migration from Plone Classic to Plone Volto. And there is some issues with some links and some images, but they will be fixed really soon. So that's a very important milestone that we achieved. And I guess the next sprint will be mostly then pulling it all together, creating new landing pages and front pages for the content. For example, these used to be this one used to be a mosaic page. Obviously, in Volto you don't have that, so we'll recreate that by hand in the Volto editor. So there's nothing.
The homepage landing page.
Everything else is there. Okay, I'll stop my sharing now.
Yeah. So technically, the small thingy that you run besides is a small service written in JavaScript, because I think the conversion tool uses a lot of the functionality already in the Slate.js code base to do this conversion. Slate.js itself, I think, has already part of converters, and that's why you have to start it as a separate service, because we can't run JavaScript and Python in the same process.
There is a Docker container that is easy to spring up, or you just do npm install npm.
Yeah, but that's the explanation for the separate service there, because it's using it's running in JavaScript.
Yeah.
So, Philip, as usually we're over. So this is your time management speaking. We're already a bit over an hour for the recording. Very quickly, you had an add-on you wanted to mention.
Okay. But we could. There is a small tool called Collective Easy Form Plugin.registration. I'll not show that, but it's a really nice small add-on, collective.easyformplugin.registration. And if you install it, your easy forms, where you create your forms by hand, get a new tab, and you can check a box which says this is now a registration form. So you have an event and you can say a maximum number of attendees. You can have a waiting list with a maximum number of people. You can show how many people are already registered, how many free places there are still. You can have a start and an end date when registration is open and when registration is no longer possible, and you have nice warnings if you come too late, for example. But the form, usually you do a easy form and you unpublish it, but this is much nicer. You just can't submit the form anymore if this period is over. So that is a really nice and tiny thing to allow you to have basically simple event management mechanisms in your custom forms, and you can add, and you have all kinds of forms. You can have all kinds of fields like t-shirt size, gender, whatever, food preferences, and stuff like that. So that's really nice. I wanted to plug that.
Okay, let me plug one other thing. Besides the new Plone.org Sprint, there was a second sprint that latched on later to the effort last weekend, which is upgrading all the tooling for the documentation. So there's also a documentation will be needed for Plone 6. We have had a lot of documentation and also documentation tooling things for the previous Plone versions. But the training material, the training Plone.org was using a different tooling and much simpler tooling than what was previously, because it was longer ago, created for our docs.plone.org. So what happened is a few people in our community, under lead of Steve Percy and Katja Suus, they already updated our training material last year to have a fancy new look and a new theme and much improved functionality on trainingplone.org. And it was discussed and decided, okay, for Plone 6, let's see if we can use the same tooling, but then start the Plone 6 docs anew, which was also already a plan, content-wise, and use that tooling. So that has happened last weekend. Kudos. It really makes things a lot easier.
It was long overdue.
But to plug their request, now it's time to actually start writing the documentation. So I guess there will be another sprint announced shortly, where we will have to collect really people who know Plone but can write content, and not because the tooling is now kind of there and updated. So that's also a mini sprint that was held this weekend. But for the next weeks, 2 months, we really need to get our stuff pulled together and start writing new content for docsplone.org Plone 6.
Yeah, there is a preview page. It's linked to from the in the collective, so you can look at that. We'll add the link to the show notes. And thanks to the effort that's going on there, I hope we'll see release of these docs soon.
Well, we don't see a release if we don't get finding people who know.
Yeah, I promise I will move some of the documentation that is more reference than training from Training Plone Org into that. Most importantly, the dexterity reference, which has like all kinds of fields, all like default factories and whatnot, and also the chapter on relations is more documentation than training. So these two at least move into the training and into the docs.
Okay.
There's another thing that's happening the last couple of days. Just
one time, your last chance, final words.
The last one. There is a discussion about ideas for Google Summer of Code on community Plone.org, and some great ideas are being discussed. And what I totally loved was some person came in and said, wouldn't it be great if we could change the fav icon in Plone through the web? And I was saying, that would be so cool, because it really annoyed me because it's hard. It's a development tool. And Mike answered, hey, it's already done. It's merged in the Plone 6 branch. And I just checked 6-classic demo Plone.org, and there it is. It's already merged. You can add your fav icon through the web. And a lot of other things are being discussed for Google Summer of Code. Obviously, this one doesn't have to be done as Google Summer of Code. More work for Plone Workflow Manager. Work on export, import, on bulk editing and stuff like that. So that's the community at its best.
You can
discussing good ideas.
You can find a discussion on community.plone.org. our discourse. I think I saw quite a few messages going around that the last few days.
Yeah. Let's wrap this up.
Yeah.
Fred,
so
what are we going to do next month?
Yeah, so
no episode because we were way over an hour.
Well, this was late. This was mid to end of January. So let's try to do the next episode again at the first part of February. So okay. I think we'll at least have an Alpha 3 to discuss then. With hopefully parts of Plone Volto more merged in now, because I think that was also a small discussion thing there that it wasn't ready and you had to edit yourself to Alpha 2 to see it working. So that will probably be done as well. So yeah, let's record the next one again in the first or second week of February.
Yeah,
especially since February is shorter, so we've got even 3 days less.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Keep the recommendations coming in. So we read your emails, and we even do a whole show about composite tools because of that. So thanks for that. Keep doing that. Thanks for listening, and have a great rest of the January and early February until we see you soon.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Stay safe.
Yeah. Stay safe. See ya.